מסכת בבא קמא דף מ"ט נו משנה שור שהיה מתכוון לחברו והיכה את האישה ויעשו ילדיה פטור מדמי ולדות. If an ox is intending to harm another ox and then by mistake it hits a pregnant woman and causes her a miscarriage, the owner of the ox does not have to pay for the miscarried offspring. This is in contrast to humans. והאדם שהיה מתכוון לחברו והיכה אישה ויעשו ילדיה משלם דמי ולדות. If a man intends to harm another man and by mistake ends up hitting a woman, that's exactly the case that's mentioned in the Torah in Simhat 21, and causes her a miscarriage, then the man who hit her does have to pay. So this is an important contrast. In fact, regarding the intention, the Gemara is going to explain in a minute that even if the ox intended to gore the woman and cause her miscarriage, still the owner of the ox does not have to pay. This is simply a general rule. An ox owner does not have to pay for the miscarriage, whereas a human does have to pay for a miscarriage. The source for this was we learned back on Daf Mem Bet. Of here, Rav Ada Bar Ahava says when men are fighting, even if there is a son ba'isha, anshu, even if there is cause to harm to the woman and she dies, they also have to pay for the miscarried offspring. But that's because they intended to hit one another. If they intend to hit the woman herself, then they are not fined because they're going to get capital punishment for killing the woman, and therefore they don't have to pay. But that is different from oxen. An oxen, even if the ox intends to kill the woman herself, nevertheless, the ox's owner does not have to pay for the fetuses, because the pasuk says Baal Hashor Naki. All right, this is in the main pasuk regarding a shor tam, that if it goes and kills a woman, the ox will get the death penalty, and the owner does not have to pay financially for the offspring. So that's the pasuk that the rabbis derive it from, and that explains the difference between animals and humans. Now, kesad meshalem deme veladot, regarding the humans, where the human intends to hit his friend and then by mistake hits the woman and causes her to lose her pregnancy, he has to pay for the offspring. How do you do that? How do you pay for the value of the offspring? We estimate the market value, and as on the slave market, how much would she be worth before she gave birth and how much after. Before she gives birth, she's worth more, because anyone who buys her, if she as a slave, if she would be a slave, would be buying not only her but also these future children that would also be owned by slaves. Furthermore, a pregnant woman is nice and healthy, has a nice glow to her, shows that she's fertile, and so that health factor, robustness factor, also adds in. However, after she already gave birth, then you're only getting the woman herself without the future children and without that healthy glow that she has. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, imken mi shehaisha yoledet meshabachat. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that doesn't make sense. You're telling me it doesn't make sense, because when a woman gives birth, she actually gets increases in value. When she's pregnant, she can't work very hard, and also she may die in childbirth. So that's kind of risky to buy a pregnant woman. But after she gives birth, then you know that she passed it successfully, and now she can also do more strenuous labor. So it's the opposite. She has more value. So if you're going to take the value before minus the value after, you're going to get a negative amount. That doesn't make sense. Rather, we estimate the value of the offspring. Someone could buy on the market value, right? How much would you pay for these offspring that will grow up to be slaves? And so that amount, we see how much it is, and the payment is given to the husband, as the pasuk says. The pasuk is here that two men are fighting. V'nagifu isha hara v'yasu yaldeha. The Gemara in a few minutes is going to ask about this. Why are you saying that she's pregnant and then her fetuses she has a miscarriage? If she has a miscarriage, isn't that obvious that she was pregnant? So hold on to this. So then, and there's no damage to the mother. Then, as they yashit, as the assess, they will give alav baal ha'isha v'natan b'flilim. The husband will give that in court. So you see that the payment goes to the husband. Now, what if there is no husband? He died. So then the payment will go to his heirs. Not to her heirs. However, if she was a Canaanite maidservant or a convert who was married to another servant or a convert who died, meaning that there are no heirs, then the human who hid her does not have to pay anyone. He gets off the hook because there's no one to make the claim. The woman herself can't make the claim because she doesn't keep it. Instead, it's the husband, and if there is no husband and no heirs, then there's no one to pay, and there is no payment. The perpetrator does not have to pay anyone. Okay. Now, regarding the resha of this Mishnah that says if the animal intended to kill another animal, to gore another animal, but then by mistake hit a woman, then the owner does not have to pay for the miscarriage. So it sounds like that the reason that it doesn't have to pay is because it intended to gore another ox. But let's say it intended to gore the woman, then it sounds like one would have to pay. Is that true? This Mishnah and the inference we have from it seems to be a challenge against Ravada bar Hava, back in Daf Membet, who we quote here in part, who said that oxen that have intention to gore a woman do not have to pay for demeh veladot. And according to this, one is only not liable if they intended to kill another ox, but if it intended to harm the woman, then one would have to pay. But Ravada said if it intended to gore the woman, one would not have to pay. So this is a challenge to Ravada. He can't argue against the Mishnah. Ravada says, no, my halacha is correct. And the truth is that although the Mishnah only mentioned the case where it intends to gore another ox, the same would be true that one would not be liable even if the ox intended to gore the woman. Also, one would not have to pay, the owner would not have to pay for the offspring. Why? The offspring. That's the law, right? He already derived that from Baal Ashor Naki. Now, how come the Mishnah mentions only this case then? The Mishnah said that it intended to gore another ox. Why? It only said this language in the first clause because it wanted to set up a parallelism for the second clause, where it says if a human intends to harm his friend, and then by mistake they cause a miscarriage to a woman nearby, because that is the exact case in the Mishnah when two men are fighting with each other. So since that was the case in the Sefa, where there are two humans are trying to harm each other, so in the Resha, just for the purpose of parallelism, it says that the ox was intending to gore another ox. It's patur. But in fact, the same law would be true even if the ox was intending to gore a human being. That's simply the law. A human is responsible for causing a miscarriage, but an ox if an ox does it, the owner is not responsible. Amar Rav Papa, shor shenagachat hashivcha v'yasu yeladeha, meshalem demeh veladot. My ta'ama, chamarta me'abarta be'al mahu de'azek. De'amar kera, shvu lachem po im hachamor am hadome lachamor. Rav Papa says, unlike if we just said that an ox gores a Jewish woman, then the owner does not gores and causes a miscarriage to a Jewish woman, the owner does not have to pay. However, if an ox gores a Canaanite maidservant and causes her a miscarriage, then the owner does have to pay. Now you might think, oh, see, this is more valuable. But actually, the reason is, in a way, the opposite, because it's the same as if the ox gored a pregnant donkey and caused it a miscarriage, as the pasuk says regarding in the context of Akedat Yitzhak, where Abraham says to the servants, the non-Jewish servants there, you stay here with the chamor, meaning you are the same or similar to the chamor. Now, don't take this literally to mean that any Canaani or non-Jew is in any way like an animal, because it's not talking about the value of the life. If someone kills a Canaanite slave, one would get capital punishment, like killing a human, not like an animal. So this is not doesn't mean literally, but rather just in a legal sense. Causing a miscarriage to a Jewish woman, one is not liable if his ox does that. But for a Canaanite slave, since it is owned by a slave, is part of its person's property. And just like if someone caused harm to an animal that was pregnant and that caused it a miscarriage, so that's damage to property where the owner has to pay if his ox does that. So too, if it's a pregnant slave and now has a miscarriage, that's damage to property, and the owner has to pay. Owner has to pay for damage that his ox does. The exception is if it's a Jewish woman, because over there, in that case in the Torah, it says Baal Ashur Naki. That's the exception to the rule, but that would only apply to a Jewish woman. But in Eved Kanaani, since it's like property, has the same law as property. And so again, not that humans and animals are actually the same, but just legally, for this particular case, are compared. Kesad mishalem deme veladot. Now, how do we assess the value? We saw machloket in the Mishnah about that, so we're going to expand on that. So now we ask, how come the Mishnah says kesad mishalem deme veladot? All right, that was the question, and it says that we estimate the value of the woman before she gave birth and after she gave birth. So the question here is that Demeh Veladot sounds like it's only the value of the fetus itself. But what about the different value in the mother? If you remember, we had talked about regarding a cow, that a pregnant cow increases in value both because of the fetuses and also because of the larger girth and weight of the cow that makes it healthier. So we're doing something similar. And again, apologies for this comparison between humans and animals. But nevertheless, we're asking, what do you mean demeh veladot? Shebach veladot meba'eleh. How come you're only talking about the value of the fetus? What about the increased value to the mother because she's pregnant? Hachi nami ka'amar. Kesad misham demeh veladot v'shebach veladot. The Gemara says, you're right. Really what the Mishnah means to ask is, how do we evaluate the value of the offspring and the increase in the mother because of the offspring, because of being pregnant, right? Both of these is a loss that this guy, the men who are fighting, and causes her a miscarriage, causes her a loss on both of these counts. So that's really is indeed what it means, and we have to evaluate. How do you evaluate that? You look at her market value before and her market value after. Her market value before is going to include both her increased health and also the offspring, the future offspring, and she loses both of those items. So both will be included in that evaluation. To that, Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Imken Mishaisha Yoledet Mishabachat. But Rashbag says, no, but if you go try this in the marketplace, you'll see that a woman goes for less amount when she's pregnant because she may die in pregnancy. And so, this is a risk factor here that decreases her value. So then if you do it your way, you're going to go from a lower amount before to a higher amount after. So he's not going to have to pay anything. Maika Amar. So now what does Rashbag mean when he says this? Amar Abachi Kamar v'chi isha meshabachat kodem sheteled yoter milachar sheteled. Right. So now we're just expanding and explaining Rashbag's objection. He says, does a woman increase in value? Is a woman of an increased value before she gives birth compared to after? She's actually worth more after she gives birth than before. Therefore, Rashbag says, no, we praise the value of the fetuses. We say, how much would you pay for these fetuses? And that's the value that's given over to the husband. Or how much would you pay to stop someone from damaging these fetuses? Okay, so we evaluate that directly, and not in terms of the value of the mother before and after. Good. Now this explanation of Rashbag that we Rabbah figured out because it makes sense. We also have a braita that supports it. It's the exact same language where the braita and Rashbag's name is saying, it doesn't say Rashbag, but it's obvious that this is a response to the Tanakama and challenging and saying, does a woman is she worth more before she gives birth compared to after? It's the opposite. She is worth more after she gives birth than before. Rather, we just focus on the value of the fetuses to the husband and give that money to the husband. Rava Amar Hachi Katane. Rava has a different explanation of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. He says this is what he is saying. V'chi isha lemishi yoledet mishabachat ve'en la'asma b'shevach ve'ladot kelum ela shemit ha've'ladot ve'notin labal ve'shevach ve'ladot holkin. So Rava is objecting to Tanakama in a different way. Tanakama said that there's a increased value of the woman and of the fetuses, and all that money goes to the husband. But Rava, according to Rava, Rashbag objects to that and says, when the woman, the woman's fetuses, does that benefit only? Who does it go? Who does it go to? Right? Her increased value by being pregnant, does it only go to the husband? Right? That means to her husband, to he who with whom she is giving birth, because of whom she is giving birth. Is her increased value only due to him, meaning only due to the fetuses and future children that he will get out of it? That's not the only value. And does she herself in her own body not enjoy an increase in value because of the pregnancy? In other words, we understand that the value of the fetuses should go to the husband, but why should the husband get all the value, increased value of her now, increased health, increased girth, and special glow and all that she deserves at least part of it. Rather, Rashbag is saying that we estimate how much has the fetus worth. That all goes to the husband as the head of the household. He's the one that is losing those children, and so all the money goes to him. But the increase to her because she is pregnant with these children, that they split. That is half to the husband, and she gets to keep half as well. And we have a braita that supports Rava's interpretation of Rashbag as well. Tanya Namehachi Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel v'chi isha lemishi yoledet mishabachat ve'en la'asma b'shevach ve'ladot kelum. Same language. Is it true that a woman is increasing only because of her husband, meaning only because of the fetuses she is carrying, and for herself, does she have no increase in her own body that she deserves to keep? if she does have increased value also. Rather, we evaluate all the different types of damage separately. We take the nezek by itself. Nezek here means if, let's say, because of what this guy did to hit her, it causes her other types of damage to her body. So all that amount will be split between the husband and the wife. Pain that is caused by her for giving her this miscarriage, that the perpetrator also has to pay, and that goes to her. She's the one that felt the pain, so she gets that money. And the value of the offspring itself, the fetuses themselves, that money goes entirely to the husband. And the increase to her value because she's pregnant and that special glow, that is split. And so that's exactly what Rava said, right? That the increase in her value is partly because of the fetuses that go to the husband, but in part is due to her own body, and therefore she deserves to keep part of that payment. Good. So now we saw that there's two interpretations of Rashbag, and one by Rabbah and one by his student Rava, and each of them have a baraita that supports them. Now it's okay for two Amoraim to argue with each other, but it's curious to have two baraitot that are each explaining Rashbag, but are doing so in opposite ways. So we ask, Kashiyad Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Ad Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. How could two baraitot that are the words of Rashbag, even though the first one didn't say his name explicitly, it was obvious that there was it was explaining his view. How could you have two statements by Rashbag contradicting each other? Right? According to the first one, it challenged the Tanna Kama and says, wait, a woman's value decreases because of pregnancy, and the second one assumed that her value increases when she is pregnant. So, la kashya, we explain, kan b'mevakeret, kan b'shena mevakeret. The first braita that assumed that she is worth less when she's pregnant and her value goes up, right? That was that question back there. How could you evaluate to take the amount earlier and subtract the one after, right? Then you'll get a negative number. That was talking about where it's her first pregnancy. When it's a woman's first pregnancy, then there is a high risk that she may not make it through pregnancy. And so that's why when she's pregnant, she's worth less. Who wants to buy such a risky investment? And her price will go up after she gives birth. However, so that's the first baraita is explaining that case. The second baraita is talking about where she had already given birth at least once, and now you know that she can do it. She can give birth. There's much less of a risk to die in childbirth if she already had a successful childbirth, and therefore from that one on, she is worth more when she's pregnant. She has that increased health and the increase and the children, the future children that she will have, and she decreases in value after giving birth, and that is the second baraita. I was talking about that case. Good. Now, the Rabbanan said that all of the increase for being pregnant, not only because of the offspring, but also the increased health of the pregnant woman, the husband gets all of that money. Why? Why shouldn't she share in it? Like Rashbag says, Kidetnan mimashma shenemar v'yasu yadei yodea shehi hara tamatam lomar hara lomar lecha sheba cherayon la baal. Right. So back at the original Pesukim again, it says that they nagefu they harm a pregnant woman, and she has a miscarriage. Isn't that obvious that she was pregnant? You can't have a miscarriage if you weren't pregnant to begin with. So why does it say this extra word? To teach me that the increased value because of her pregnancy also gets paid to the husband, right? The rest of the pasuk says, and you'll pay that all to the husband. So that includes not only the offspring, but also the increased health because of pregnancy. Now, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Hai Hara, Mai Darish Be. So that's a good point. Shpag, who disagrees, he thinks that the increased health value for the health of the pregnancy does not all to go to the husband. So what is he going to do with this extra word? לעולם אינו חייב עד שיקנה כנגד בית ההיריון. אמר הפאפא, לא תמה כנגד בית ההיריון ממש, אלא כל אחד דסליק בשכמה לוולד, לפוקי יד ורגל דלה. So Rashbag will use the extra word hara, as we see in the following statement, where the Ariel Eliyahu A says the man the fighting man who hits her only has to pay for the miscarriage if he hit her next to the place of pregnancy, meaning hit her on the belly. Then you say hit her right on the belly. Yeah, that caused the offspring. But if he hit her elsewhere on her body, then he could say, well, it's just a coincidence. I hit her somewhere else. I didn't cause that the miscarriage. Papa, however, adds and explains that when Ariel Eliyahu said that, he didn't mean only literally right at the place of pregnancy, only right on the belly, but rather any place where the wound could affect the child. So in other words, anywhere on around the abdomen, around the torso area, even on the side, it still, even indirectly, will cause an impact to the fetus and cause a miscarriage. So that all that would be included in her midsection. What would be excluded would be if he hit her on her arm or on her leg. Hitting her leg causes a wound, but is not going to cause a miscarriage. And so if this fighting man hit her on her leg and then she had a miscarriage, he will not have to pay for the miscarriage, because he'll argue that that was not my fault. And how do you know that? Because it says the word hara to teach me that only if he hits a pregnant woman, not just that she's pregnant, but hits her in a place that could affect her pregnancy around the abdomen, but not in a place, not if he hit her on the leg, then he would not have to pay for the miscarriage. We now jump to the end of the Mishnah. Hayta shivcha v'nishtachrera o giyoret patur. If the pregnant woman was a Canaanite maidservant or a convert who was married also to a Canaanite servant or a convert who died, so he has no heirs, then the assailant does not have to pay anyone, right? Because the value of the offspring goes to the husband, and since the husband is not alive and he has no heirs, there's no one to pay it to. Okay, now we're going to see a machloket about what if he died even before the assailant had hit her. Can she get payment for the offspring in that case? So machloket Rabba and Rav Chisda. Amar Rabba, lo shanu ela shechaval ba bechaye hager umet hager. The Mishnah's law that the assailant does not have to pay is only if the injury happened while the husband was alive and then he died. Techavan techaval ba bechaye hager zachabu hager. Because since the husband is alive at the time of the injury, so the husband deserves the payment for the offspring. Techavan demet hager zachabehu min hager. And once the husband dies, so the assailant is no one to claim it, right? It just becomes hefker, and he didn't pay yet, so the assailant just keeps the money. He gets it from the hands of the ger, because the ger never had it in his hands, and so he just keeps the money and he doesn't have to pay anyone. However, if the husband died first, and only then the assailant who was fighting with his friend hit this pregnant woman who happens to be a convert, and she has no husband is not alive at the time, then she merits that payment directly. She gets it, and the assailant has to pay her. Okay, so that's Rabbah that says the assailant does have to pay in this case where the husband had already been dead. Amar Rav Chisda, Mari dichi atu v'ladot serareninhu v'zachya behu. Rav Chisda said, right, master of this ruling, how can you say such a thing? Are the offspring like bundles of money that she acquires it? Is it just like a bundle of money? Oh, well, it should go to him, but he's not around, so then he keeps it. But if he's not there, then she gets it. Like you're just passing it around, and whoever happens to have it last. This is not the way it works. They're not bundles of money to say, well, if there's no husband around, then, it's hers, as if when the husband is alive, then it's his fetuses, but when he dies, then it's her fetuses. That's not the reason for the law. Ela ite laba'al zacha le-rachamana, le laba'al la. Rather, it's simply a Torah law. If the husband is in existence, if he's alive, then he's granted compensation for the offspring. If there is no husband, then nobody gets compensation, because the Torah says, right, you pay the husband. Kasher yashit alav haba'al. So that's it. No husband, no payment. And even if there was no husband, the husband had died beforehand, still, she would not collect. That is Rav Chista's opinion. All right, now we're going to challenge Rabbah. Metibe, hikata isha v'yasu yeladeha noten nezek v'sa'al le'isha meveladot laba'al. En ha'ba'al noten liyorshav. En ha'isha noten liyorsheha. Hayta shivcha v'nishtachrera o giyoret zacha. If a man hit a woman and she caused her a loss of her pregnancy, so he has to pay any damage that he caused to her or pain. That money goes to her. The value of the fetuses themselves go to the husband. If there is no husband, his heirs get it. If the wife dies, then her and her heirs get the payment that was due, the payments that are due to her, right? Like the sa'ar. If the woman was a shivcha, who was freed, or a giyoret, who therefore has no heirs, and the husband also is not alive, then zacha, then the assailant keeps the money. Okay, so the assailant keeps the money, and so this says that she does not get the money, right? It sounds like no matter what the case is, there's never a case where she keeps the money, because if her husband dies, then that's it. There's no one to pay. So this sounds like it agrees with Rav Chista and is a challenge against Rabbah. All right, Amri, we answer. Mi adifa mi matnitin. Wait a second, is this Braita any stronger than our Mishnah? Deokimna shechabal ba bechaye hager umetager. Rabbah already limited the case of our Mishnah to a case when the injury happened while the husband was alive, and then the husband died after, and that's why the assailant doesn't have to pay anyone. So here also we can say we're talking about a case where the injury happened while the husband was alive, and then the husband died, and that's why zacha is the assailant keeps the money. But if in fact the husband had died beforehand, right, and she was alive, then she would, and then the assailant causes her a miscarriage, then she would get the money herself, because we're limiting this case just like we limited the Mishnah. So Rabbah has an easy answer. Or another way we can explain this Baraita is, in fact, it's talking about all cases, even if the injury happened after the husband died. Zachta. Instead of saying zacha, that the assailant gets the money, say zachta, she gets the money. Indeed, right? If that's the case, so in that case it would only be talking about where the husband had died first, and then the injury happened. So if she's shivcha nishtachra giyoret, she gets the money herself. All right, lema ketanae. This machloket between Rabbah and Rav Chista seems to be parallel to two Tanaitic opinions, as follows: Bat Yisrael sheniset leger ve'nit'abera mimenu ve'chaval ba bechaye hager noten demeh veladot lager u'la'achar mitat hager taneh hada chayav ve'taneh hada patur. So Braita says, if you had a Jewish woman who got married to a convert and became pregnant from him, and then someone came and assailed her, causing her a miscarriage. If her convert husband is alive, then the assailant will have to pay him. If he dies, then if the injury happens after he dies, right, the convert husband dies first, then, well, there's two B'raitot. The first B'raita says he has to pay, the assailant has to pay her, and there's another one says he doesn't have to pay anyone. So you see, two B'raitot match up with our machloket. My love tana'eh ninhu. So is the machloket Amoraim not already a machloket between two Tanaitic opinions. So Rabbah would say the first one, Hayav, and Rav Chisda would follow the second one that said Patur. So we say, yes, you're right. According to Rabbah, he could only fit with the first one that says Chayav. There's no way we can reconcile Rabbah with the Patur. But how about Rav Chisda? Rav Chisda, Milema Tanaihi, is that true also for Rav Chisda? He can only explain the second one. Is there any way to reconcile the first Braita Chayav with Rav Chisda? Can we come up with a case where Rav Chisda would say that the assailant does have to pay her? And the answer is yes, in a couple of ways. La kashya harabanan haraban Shimon ben Gamliel. We can explain that the second baraita that says patur was Rabbanan that we saw from Amud Aleph. Rabbanan say that all the payments, remember the payment for the lost fetus and the payment for increased health because of her pregnancy, all go to the husband. No husband, no payment at all. Whereas the first baraita that says hayav, that is talking about the value of the increase in health. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says the increase in her health because of her pregnancy is split. Half goes to him, half goes to her. So if he died, then she gets the full payment. That's what means chayav. And the patur, that's what it means. That's why it says chayav. And now even Rashbag would agree within Rav Chisda that the payment for the offspring themselves only goes to the husband, no payment at all. So that's how we reconcile it. The one patur is Rabbanan, and the chayav one is Rashbag, and it's referring to the obligation to pay the increased in her health because she's pregnant. Now we ask, wait, if it's Rashbag, why does the Braita have to say if he died first before the injury? Even if he was alive the whole time, she would get half. So there is chayav, she'd still get some payment. And the answer is mechayim itle palga lachar mita kule. No, but still, if he is alive, she only gets half. But if he died, if the husband died, then she gets the entire payment. That's the chayav means chayav. The full payment goes to her. That's what that Braita was teaching. That's one way of explaining both, but I taught according to Rav Chisda. Another way, v'baitema ha v'had Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel kan b'shebach veladot kan b'dme veladot. Both Braitot could be talking about following Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and within Rav Chisda, the one that says he is liable, the assailant is liable to pay. That was talking about her increase in value because she's pregnant and nice and healthy. And so that payment does go to her, right? At least half. And if the husband died, she gets all of it. And the Braita that says he does not have to pay patur, that's talking about the value of the offspring itself, which according to Rav Chisda, no husband, no payment at all, no matter when he died. Amreh, a challenge to this. Amreh mishevach veladot lishama deme veladot. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel lishma lerabbanan. This is, well, logically, can't we compare these payments and say, since the husband has to pay the increase in her value because she's pregnant, maybe she, by that account, if there's no husband, then he should have to pay also for the value of the offspring itself. And since that we know is Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, if we establish the first one, and that would mean that according to Rashbag, the husband has to pay everything when to her if the husband died, then maybe Rabbanan agree, because it doesn't say anywhere that they disagree on this point. So we say no, we reject that. It only makes sense regarding her increased in value because of her health, being pregnant, since she shares in that in that payment, right? She gets half no matter what. So then, if there's no husband, then she should get all of it. That makes sense. But the mevladot la shaychayada begavayhu la zachya behu kelal. But regarding the payment of the fetuses, the value of the fetuses themselves, where she has no share of it at all, so then she's not granted to her at all, even if the husband had died. So the first analogy that you made does not make sense, and therefore we don't even have to bother rejecting the second analogy. Since we just spoke about a convert who dies without heirs, we ask a question about such a case. In general, if a convert dies, and that means his biological family is not his family, so they don't count as heirs, and if he didn't have children of his own, then he has no one to inherit his property. So therefore, his property becomes hefked, and anyone who comes along and grabs it first, it's theirs to keep. So we have a question in this regard. Ba'ayamine Rav Yiba Saba Merav Nachman. Rav Yiba the elder asked a question to Rav Nachman. Hamachazik b'shtarotav shel ger mahu. What if a convert dies and he has some land deeds with him? And someone comes and grabs those land deeds. What is the law? Now, he is not going to acquire the land, because to acquire the land, you have to physically go to that land and close the gate, do something to acquire that land. But this person, all he does is take these pieces of paper. The question is, does he have the right? Can he keep the piece of paper? Does he have ownership over the paper that it's written on? So man de machazik b'shtara da'ate da'ahu machazik ubara hala chazik ushtara nami lo kana delav da'ate ashtara. On the one side is we can assume that a person who grabs onto a contract or a deed, his thoughts are that, oh, by taking this I will get the land. So really he's just using the deed in order to acquire the land. Now the land, he did not physically take possession of the land, so he doesn't get the land. And in this version, he doesn't even get the paper that it's written on, because he didn't have in mind to acquire the ownership over the paper. He only was using the paper to get the land. So now he not only does not have the land, he doesn't even own the paper, and someone else can come take it from him. That's one side. Or do we assume that when this person goes and grabs that contract, his intention is to get the land and also to keep the paper for himself? And even though it doesn't work to get the land, but still, since he had in mind the paper, so the paper is also his. That's the question. Rav Nachman answers, Amale ani mori vechi lasur al pi selochi tu sarich. Amale lasur velasur. Rav Nachman says, tell me, what does he need the paper for? Why would someone go and run and grab a piece of paper? Does he need it to cover his flask? You have a flask, you have some liquid in it, you want to keep it covered, so you take a piece of parchment, not paper, we're talking about parchment, right? And you tie it on top to keep it closed. What, he needs a little piece of parchment to cover his flask? I mean, why would anybody in their right mind be thinking, while he has in mind he thinks that he's going to get this piece of land? You think a person is really concerned about, I'm also going to use the parchment so I could cover my flask? And Rav Yiva's answer is yes, indeed. Right? It could very well be that he has that in mind as well. Why not? Okay. So in any case, he certainly does not get the field, and according to Rav Nachman, sounds like he really does not have in mind the paper, the parchment either. אמר רבא, משכונו של ישראל ביד גר, ומת הגר, ובא ישראל אחר והחזיק בו, ועושים אותו מידו. מטעמה כיוון דמית לגר, פקע לשיבודה. If a Jew, or someone born Jewish, has an item that he gave as a pledge to a non-Jew. So the non-Jew lent him money, and the non-Jew said, give me that a coat. Give me your coat, and I'm going to hold on to your coat as a pledge, and I have a lien on it, and I'm going to hold on to it until you pay back the loan. Okay, so the non-Jew is holding on to it. And then the non-Jew dies. And then someone else, a different Jew altogether, comes and grabs this coat because, and it kind of, to some degree, belonged to the convert, because the convert has a lien on it. So can that guy keep it? The answer is no. The Bet Din removes it from him and gives it to the Jew who's originally owned that coat, who gave it to the non-Jew in the first place. Why is that? Because once the non-Jew dies, the lien on the coat leaves, right? That's it. Is he has there's no one he doesn't owe him any money anymore, and this is that original Jew's coat. So the lien goes away, and then it reverts back to the original owner. That third party did not have a right to come and take it, so we take it away from him. This contrasts with the opposite case. Mashkono shel ger biyad Yisrael umet hager uba Yisrael acher vechazik bo ze kana keneged ma'otav veze kana et hashe'ar. If you have a collateral of a convert that a Jew is holding on to, right? The Jew says to the convert, listen, when you pay me, you can get your coat back. But it belongs originally to the convert, and now the Jew just has a lien on it. And then that convert died. and same scenario, a third party, Jew comes and grabs onto that coat that's in the home of the Jew, and he tries to acquire it. Yes, he indeed ze kana keneged ma'otav. So the Jew, the first Jew, to that money is owed to him. Since he had a lien on this coat, he keeps his lien. And let's say the coat is worth $100, and he had a lien of $50 because he was owed $50. So the Jew that interacted with the ger, he keeps $50 worth of the coat, but the other Jew comes along, acquires the rest of it. So the idea here is that the lien does not leave, but the Jew, even though it was in his house, does not keep the entire coat. Since he had a lien and now the convert died, so he's not going to get paid back, so he can keep that half of the value of that coat, but the other part, the other part belongs to the ger. The ger is dead, so it's hefker. So the other guy can come and take it. We ask about this ruling. V'amai tikne le hasero. Deha amar Rabbi Yosef bar Hanina hasero shel adam kona lo shelo mida'ato. Why should the third party be able to keep it? How come we don't say that the courtyard of that first Jew, who is the one that interacted with the convert in the first place, how come his courtyard doesn't acquire it for him? After all, Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina says that a person's courtyard can effectuate a transaction, an acquisition for him, even without his knowledge, right? If I have a courtyard and someone puts something in my courtyard, then it's mine because it was in my domain in my courtyard. Even if I didn't know, he wants to give me a gift, like Amazon delivers a package in my yard, then it is mine, and no one would be allowed to come and take it or steal it. So why don't we say that since the coat was in the house or yard or possession of the first Jew, that he gets the whole thing, and the third party does not have a right to come and take it because it already is possessed by the first Jew. And the answer is Amre hachab ma'askinan delete. We're talking about a case where that Jew who was owed money was not around. It was in the coat happened to be in his courtyard, but he was somewhere else. He went to the store. The rule is that if at any time that a person, an owner, is nearby, is present, such that if he wanted to, he could walk over and physically pick up that item and take it, then the courtyard can acquire it for him. You don't have to go and actually go pick it up. But you have to be nearby with the potential to pick it up yourself. Then the courtyard can be an extension of your hand. However, but if the person is not present, not near the item, in this case the coat, in the courtyard, such that if he wanted to, he could go and physically pick it up and acquire it. So if he's not around, then his courtyard also does not acquire it for him. And so this case here is talking about a case where the owner, that the creditor is not around, and therefore, even though the coat is in his courtyard, he doesn't acquire it automatically by being in his yard. So he keeps half of the coat that he has a lien on, but the other half that belonged to the ger, once the ger dies, someone else can come and grab it. And the final conclusion is that if a person is not present in his courtyard, he does not acquire the thing automatically, and therefore, in fact, the other person who comes and grabs it can keep his half. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.